IDP Pro Manager podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is presented by WynnBET. WynnBET is now live in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Louisiana, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Tennessee, and Virginia. From boosted same-game parlays to live in-game odds, WynnBET has what you need to win. Sign up today. Bet $100, get $100. Easy as that. At sportsgamblingpodcast.com/WynnBET. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/WYNNBET. State restrictions apply. We're also brought to you by the College Basketball Experience. March Madness is heating up and you need to subscribe to the College Basketball Experience. It's awesome, baby!
Welcome back to episode 3. It is exciting times. Weather's going crazy, and we're going crazy for some IDP linebackers. We're going to talk a little Tier 2 guys this week. But first and foremost, thank you guys as always for joining us. Don't forget, click that like, subscribe, the notification icon, stay up to date when we do live. Gary, Kraig, how are we doing this morning, gentlemen? Gary, I'll start with you. How's the world treating you over there today?
Well, I know you got a little bit of storming going on. We got a little bit of rain going on. I'm trying to keep up on the combine stuff a little bit, man. And it's just a beautiful day. It's all football, right?
It is. It is all football. The combine, at least day one, starting nice with them IDPs. We got some good action going on there. Kraig, how are we, my friend? How's the world treating you?
It's Friday, talking football, doing all right.
Yeah, doing all right. I like it. All right, as they would say in the movies. So today we are talking our Tier 2. So if you missed last week's Tier 1, go back and watch it. We'll give you the high-end guys, some of the best of the best. Now we're talking about some of the next best of the best, kind of our next tier of guys. We've got about another 12 guys we want to talk about, and it starts with a Bengal. We got Logan Wilson of the Cincinnati Bengals. We got 2 seasons in a row of strong IDP production. Kraig, what's your take on Logan Wilson, and how are you feeling about him?
I like him. You know, he clearly with our combined rankings is right after the Tier 1, and I know there's a number of people that have him in that Tier 1 sort of area. His competition, Tremaine Pratt, you know, over the past couple of years here is a free agent, and it'll be interesting to see what he garners on the market. The Bengals have a lot of people on that offense that they want to pay, and it seems like they want to keep together. So, you know, the money will have to be saved somewhere else. And, you know, Logan Wilson is going to be under contract with them for at least this year. This is going to be his 4th year, and we'll see if he gets re-signed there. But he's proven the past 2 years when he's on the field, he's going to be productive for you. You know, he's missed a couple of games each of the past couple of years, but he's still, like you said, surpassed 100 combined tackles. And past year especially, he showed, you know, he can get you some of those big plays, those tackles for a loss, sacks, pass deflections added in there. So I really like his production. He's got age on his side, and he's an athletic guy that fits what the NFL wants these days. So I'm a big fan of his.
Yeah, 2 of the 3 years in the league, he's been very productive, right? Gary, what do you make of are you targeting this guy? Are you trying to actively trade for him as your kind of LB2? Where's your head at with a guy like Logan Wilson?
Well, you know, I still consider him, especially in standard leagues. I mean, he's definitely a standard league option. So when it really boils down to for Logan Wilson, I might have had him a little bit more down on our board in our consensus here, but I'm a little bit concerned about the future. I do believe the production is going to be there, but he's not that top end guy that we were wanting to get. I think Jermaine Pratt got a lot of his production this year. He was working for a contract, so he showed out well. With Logan Wilson, I think he's going to be like dare I say, Eric Kendricks, and just be, you know, never that really top 3 or 4 FF point getter and linebacker, but, you know, definitely top 10, top 12 range, no problem. Now we're looking at these contract situations with Cincinnati and all these offensive guys that they've got to re-sign. You got Hubbard, you got Kendricks. They're dealing with Bates. What are you going to do when Logan Wilson's due? You know, are you going to pay his ass, or is his ass going to be elsewhere, which I would think would fit somewhere else? Yeah, we would have to see if that might drop him down. But I don't think that the top end elite level guy that's going to get you 6 sacks, 4 interceptions, some, you know, that kind of playmaking, splash play type of stats, I don't think is going to be there. He's definitely a good triple digit combined tackle, solid for LB1.
Yeah, and I mean, last year he got you, I think, going to get 4 interceptions on top of the 100-plus tackles. So we know there is kind of that potential for it. I know this last year it was only 1 interception, and, and that's not super exciting. You want more than that, but, even if you need somebody who's consistently getting you tackles, this feels like probably one of the safer picks in the tier 2 guys for the tackle-heavy plays here. But I'm with you guys. He's definitely a fun long-term piece that I would target. And I got to imagine with Pratt on the team and with some of the uncertainty, you should be able to get him at a fairly discounted rate if you're trying to actively go trade for him. But I haven't tried to. That's just, kind of guessing, and listening to, it's funny. I've been talking a lot of trades in a lot of leagues I'm in, and everybody's trying to use the uncertainty because free agency and the draft hasn't happened. They're trying to use that to their advantage. So use it to yours if you're trying to target a guy like Logan Wilson.
Yep.
All right, next up is the second-year guy. Second guy that was very productive in Green Bay. We're talking Quay Walker. He showed out really well, and everybody kind of expected him to be a solid piece. I don't know if anyone expected him to pop so quickly. Kraig, what's your take on Quay Walker, and where are you at with him?
Well, for IDP players, happily the Packers were true to their word, and they used more two true linebacker sets as opposed to just the one that they had previously for quite a long time, largely due to the talent that they had around him, with Devondre Campbell being the main guy. But Quay Walker comes in. He was very productive for a rookie. He was very active in coverage, and he did pretty well there, which is nice to see for a linebacker in today's NFL. The big thing for him is, to me, is he going to get labeled as one of those sort of trouble players on the field? Because there were a couple incidents, mainly towards the end of the year, where his head wasn't in the game and he got out of the game because of it. And you can't be having that. And we've seen players, Ndamukong Suh or whoever, Albert Hainsworth, you get some of those under your belt and you get labeled a certain way by referees, and they're looking for that stuff. You got to be on the field to get us those points. So, he's a young man. I'm not saying he's a troubled person or anything like that by any means. But when you're on the field, your head's got to be in the game so you're not costing your team points and yards. So that's my big concern for him is he going to have that jump in maturity? And he'd probably be higher up on the list here if Devondre Campbell wasn't there, because Devondre Campbell, I think, is still going to be the guy in Green Bay for a couple of years.
Gary.
Deep dynasty-wise, I mean, as long as the guy, can, like Kraig explained, stay on the field and, be a pro about this, then we've got a long road of football to watch with him and enjoy a lot of production, especially after Campbell leave.
It's a big deal. I mean, you've seen some of the flashes this year, right? He had some forced fumbles, fumble recoveries. I mean, he can get you some of those big point plays depending on, obviously, like Kraig always says, how your league's scoring matters. He could be one of those guys that gets you some really fun big point weeks, and that ceiling potential is definitely something that's very intriguing with a player like Quay Walker. What also is intriguing is this.
WynnBET is the official online sports gambling book for the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. WynnBET is active in a bunch of states, and there are tons of ways to win, including live betting and same-game parlays, aka WynnBET's build your own bet. March Madness is almost here, plus plenty of ways to win getting down on the NBA, NHL, and XFL. Sign up today and receive a special offer. Bet 100, get 100. Limited to state availability. And of course, our gens, only if you hit the biggest long shot parlay of the week, you get $1,000 free credit. There's so much to choose from. All you have to do is head over to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/WynnBET so they know we sent you. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/WYNNBET. Offer subject to change. Terms and conditions at WynnBET.com. Must be 21 or older and present in a state where you play through. WynnBET is available. If you or someone you know is having a gambling problem, call 1-800-522-4700. Hey, you. Do you want an outfit for your child to show your dominance in fantasy football? Well, head over to the SGPN merch store as it continues to add new items to the store every day. Head over to store.sportsgamblingpodcast.com to get your favorite shirts, hats, sweats, hoodies. My personal new favorite item is always going to be My Dad's Better Than Your Dad at Fantasy Football. And just in time for March, save 10% off when you spend more than $40 and use the code MADNESS.
Speaking of madness, we're talking Tremaine Edmunds from Buffalo. So potential free agent. Who knows what's necessarily going to happen with him. I'll kick it to you first, Gary. This guy's never really been the elite high-end IDP prospect. What do you do with him, and what do you make of him?
Well, I mean, he's still he's been a tackle monster. He's not a big splash play type of dude. He needs to be on the field to produce and get the opportunities to do some tackling for the fact of the lack of those splash plays to help your box score. But at the same time, he's consistently did it up in Buffalo. He's had an outstanding contract year here where he's trying to get paid. And I think, if I'm up to date, they haven't came to any kind of agreement with him. And with all the other things they've got going on, kind of like the Bengals, with all the contracts, they got Poyer and stuff. I think Edmunds has earned a big payday, and he's going to get paid somewhere to be that same tackle monster. I mean, he knows how to run defenses. You can't tell me that there's some GMs out there just salivating the idea that this guy could come in and learn their system and run it like it's supposed to be and let everybody else make those plays. So, I mean, long-term, he's still young. I'm still buying. I think this is another Eric Kendricks.
Well, and I feel like in this one's you, Kraig, that the question really falls into, is he scheme dependent? Is Buffalo just the perfect spot for linebackers? I mean, look at what they've done with Matt Milano and some of these other guys. Or can we expect him to average over 100 combined tackles the rest of the year or the rest of his career, at least the rest of his big part of his career? Where are you at with a guy like Edmunds?
This is going to be his 6th year in the league, and he's only going to be 25, I think, this coming year. So he's still got a lot of time ahead of him in the NFL, and he's shown himself to be an effective player at an NFL level. There's a lot of places that he could go that I think he could fit in. Another one of them would be like a different setup, but I think he could go somewhere like Pittsburgh has been named a lot, where a place where he would go and fit. And I think by and large aware, he sort of exclude the Houston Texans here, it seems. But if you have a semi-decent defensive line in front of these guys, these linebackers are going to be able to make plays for you and get those guys so they don't leak back to the secondary all the time. And I think Tremaine Edmunds is a perfectly fine linebacker. This is right around where he belongs, I think, in my mind. It's relatively close to tier 1, but not quite there. And I think he's got a bright future for a long time still. So I'm certainly invested. And lived what some hope were around. Very few people do. He's still a great NFL player, and I think he will continue to be.
Yeah, I mean, you could see him easily be productive for another 5 to 7 years, right? Like we're seeing, those very high IQ football players, the Bobby Wagners of the world. And I'm not saying that he's Bobby Wagner, but if you're smart at the linebacker position and consistent with your tackling ability, which Edmunds is, you can have a long career. So I'm with you guys. I think the first, kind of 3 guys on our tier 2 have back end tier 1 potential on a year-to-year basis. So that makes me want to try to target them. The next guy up, maybe not so much. Dre Greenlaw from San Francisco has kind of been up and down. He's a smaller linebacker at 6 foot. He had 2 good seasons, then he got hurt and was kind of unproductive. And then last year had a bounce back, had a solid season. We'll start with you, Kraig. How do you feel about Dre Greenlaw kind of long term, and what are you doing with him?
I really like him. I mean, we really like all these guys really on the list, so that's probably not something I need to be constantly saying because we were talking about him here in our top 24. But he really showed last year when he was given that opportunity as a second linebacker for the 49ers, he can step up and be that guy. He had almost, it was over 80 solo tackles, over 120 combined. He had some big plays in terms of pass deflections, tackles for a loss in there. Didn't have a whole lot of missed tackles. He did pretty well in coverage. So he fits really nicely as that second guy. And, the 49ers have had issues with keeping linebackers on the field healthy this past year especially. So if he can stay there, I think the sky's the limit for him, even with Fred Warner there, in part because of that just elite defensive front they have.
Gary.
Drew Greenlaw is going to make somebody else a really good linebacker at some point because he's going to get paid just like Edmunds and stuff. He's just biding his time. Al-Ashir is actually an excellent guy. He is a free agent this year. If they're not re-signing him, he's going to end up somewhere. So keep your eye on him. But what I want to ask you two, why Drew Greenlaw made this list on your consensus, but not Matt Milano?
I think probably more so age for me. Matt Milano's kind of in that tier, and I think he could do it every year. But I put a guy like Greenlaw in because I'm like, yeah, he's probably going to be around maybe a little bit longer. Otherwise, they're very similar linebackers. Play style, ability, kind of ceiling is very similar to both. Kraig?
Yeah, I mean, Matt Milano's been in the league a little bit longer. Trey Greenlow's had if you want to look just across the board, comparing a better season already. And I think there's fewer questions on that defense, how it's going to proceed forward for the 49ers than there are for the Bills. Is Milano going to become the number one there if Edmunds leaves? I think they probably bring someone else in because clearly they're going for the Super Bowl now with some of the moves that they've been making in that offense that they have. 49ers are going there too, but it feels like that whole front seven for them is much more sorted out long term than it is for the Bills. And like Brad said, if you're looking dynasty, sometimes people talk 2 to 3 years or 5 years. There's just more questions about, is Milano going to continue to hold up? He's had missed a couple games every year there too. There's one season we missed quite a few of them. I really like the player, and I would have no problem if he ended up being my linebacker 2 overall. But it feels like there's just a big glut of people that could be in this linebacker 2 group because of, Gary, you talked about last week, the way that things are changing in the NFL with linebacker usage. There's a lot more guys that fit in that 60 to 80% range and not as many in that, 85 or above range.
Love it. Had to ask. I mean, this top tier is crowded, folks. There's a lot of talented guys up there, a lot of scenarios.
Matt Milano is definitely would be an underdog to get into this tier 2, kind of like this.
We're also brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Underdog is your home for off-season NFL best ball drafts, but they also got you covered for a ton of other daily games, including NBA, NHL, and PGA. Underdog Fantasy is a great way to get down with your favorite player props if they're not available in your state. Head over to UnderdogFantasy.com and use the promo code SGPN for a 100% deposit bonus up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com, promo code SGPN.
And another guy that's an underdog, the next guy on our list, Zaire Franklin from the Colts. Finally had a productive season. It took Shaq Leonard being out and nobody else other than Okereke really being viable in the middle of that defense. Kraig, we'll start with you. What are you doing with Zaire Franklin? Do you feel like he's going to, with a new coaching staff, still have the opportunity to flourish, or is he going to flounder?
I think he'll certainly have that opportunity. If you look at someone like him, contract-wise, he's a lot cheaper than what it's going to be to have like a Shaq Leonard long-term here. He's signed cheap for the next 2 years. He's going to be free agent when he's 29. And he's shown finally when he got that production, or when he got that playing time, he got the production. He didn't do a whole lot over the first 4 years of his career, but the prior team had faith in him, and prior front office for the same team had faith in him. And he showed out this past year. I mean, he had a heck of a year. If you're looking at over 100 solo tackles, almost 170 combined. And Okereke, I believe, is a free agent right now. So I kind of don't see him probably coming back with the changeover and the money he'll probably command on the open market with having Franklin and Leonard still there at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see what that team does overall with the overhaul they're going through. But Franklin, I think, has gotten the benefit of the doubt after what he showed last year.
Gary,
Nailed it. Yeah, I mean,
how do you follow that?
You just got to go with that assumption. Yeah, exactly like Kraig laid out for us. I mean, the way everything is going for Okereke, I think he's getting paid just like Jermaine Pratt and Edmunds, all these free agents, especially in the linebacker situation. There are a lot of starving teams out there. And Zaire Franklin simply let Colts know, hey, let Okereke get paid elsewhere. So we're not actually losing an IDP. We're gaining probably a step up on one. I really expect Okereke. Of course, we're going to be talking about him, I believe, here soon. But Franklin, and if we had John from the IDP pro players pod on, he would be all over Leonard and just, and it's true. The guy's got to bounce back this year, or Franklin, when it really boils down to it, he could end up a top 3 guy easily just in combined tackles.
Yeah, Leonard's a guy I've tried to move in a few people that have mentioned they're interested. And I'm like, let's do it. Let's trade him. Because I'm just when those guys start getting injured like that, and it's just a bunch of different things. It's like I'm going to move off of something like that. I'm just not excited to hold on to, especially with the depth of the linebacker group in IDP. I'll look elsewhere, right? You can look, even to the next guy on our list, even though he's 31 years old, they're going to be 31 this year, CJ Mosley from the Jets. Every year he's on the field, he's productive, except when he was hurt and when he wasn't on there for COVID, right? Other than that, you can expect 100+ combined tackles. He can give you a little bit else, maybe some big plays, but another tackle machine. So Kraig, what do you do with a guy like CJ Mosley?
If I have him and I'm anything like close to a contender, or I am a contender, I'm hanging on to him because he's one of those guys, like, really, if he was younger, he would be higher up on this list by far. It's just, to your point, an issue of age with him. Not that he's like super old, but when we're talking about guys in their 30s in the NFL, history tells us that window gets shorter. But he's still going to continue to be there for the Jets. From what I can tell, this year and probably next year, he still has pretty big dead cap and cap hits. And he fits well with that defense. He showed that last year, even, when the Jets were pseudo playoff contenders, if, they thought they were anyway with how the team was going. They need somebody in the middle of that field to sort of captain what's going on and be a leader in that linebacking core. Because outside of him, it's a whole bunch of unproven guys. I still like Quincy Williams. He might be a free agent too. I didn't look into that. But he still isn't, a CJ Mosley stud middle linebacker you can just trust to get the job done. And I expect him for the next 2 to 3 years to probably keep that role.
Gary, where are you at with him?
I think Quincy Williams will be back wait a minute. Which one's on the line and which one's the
Quinnen's
linebacker?
on the line. Quincy's
right. As long as the guy's on the line, his brother's going to be on this team probably. And more likely he's going to be, why not? They just like to let him consume all that production. It doesn't matter how talented he is because he's not very well graded. But when it comes to Mosley, man, he's getting older in the tooth. He's slipped down here. I do like him as long as he's with the Jets this year or wherever. As long as he's signed as a captain, as there's no doubt that he's going to be the best talent. I have no problem with him in redrafts and dynasty. He's just, he's getting old. It happens. Look at this. Look at these fellas.
Look at all of us.
Yeah. So you kind of just fade away, just like that in dynasty.
Well, the nice thing with a guy like Mosley is you should be able, if you're a contender, he should be easy to get. Because if you're not contending, people are willing to take a shot at going younger and doing some of those things. It's one of those things where I'm perfectly fine targeting older guys if I'm competing. It's okay. I don't mind having a couple of older pieces on my defense if I'm going to try to win it all. So we'll see. And then the next guy that we want to talk about is another, getting up there. Devondre Campbell from Green Bay is 29, going to be 30 this year. Just highly productive, basically all but his first year in the league. But he hasn't produced at the same level as a guy like CJ Mosley. So Kraig, why would you consider maybe a guy like Mosley over Campbell or vice versa? Where are you at with these kind of aging guys? Which one would you really rather take a swing at?
Like you said, Campbell's a little bit younger than Mosley by a year or so, but the difference is that we've seen there's like a high end of productive and also decently graded linebacker next to Devondre Campbell. If you look at from 2021 to 2022, that's the difference is, that 50 some combined tackles and whatever. That's the Quay Walker difference right there. They hadn't had that before in terms of being on Green Bay. And I think, this 90s, maybe 100 top for the ceiling for him combined tackles is probably what you're looking at for Devondre Campbell while he's there in Green Bay, since they have another linebacker there. They have the ability pretty much after 2024 to move on from him if they want to. And I think that is a distinct possibility if this team goes in more of a rebuilding direction. We haven't seen that a whole lot out of Green Bay, in my lifetime, for the most part.
Most people's lifetime.
They've had a great quarterback there, and it leads to Super Bowl aspirations for teams where you want a guy in the middle, veteran that you can trust. And I think that probably does turn over to be Quay Walker. That's why dynasty-wise we have Quay Walker higher here. But for the next couple of years, Devondre Campbell, I think, is still going to be a high-end linebacker. We're talking about you plug him in as your linebacker too. I think you got to be pretty happy with that.
Yeah, and we thank you guys for watching. Everybody that's on there, click hit the subscribe button, do all the things that you do to show some love, and be notified when we go live. We're live every Friday morning. So wrap us up on this player, Gary. Where are you at with him, and how do you feel about Mosley Campbell? Is there one that you prefer over the other?
Not particularly. And again, this is a three-man consensus. So that realistically, him falling right underneath Campbell or above it's splitting an IDP here, age, ability. Campbell, he's had his ups and downs over his career, and it wasn't really until he developed in his third or fourth year that he became the player that he's become now. And I just don't think that we've seen. I do think that we've seen his best ball being played in the past. And now that Walker's in there, I'm going to question as his age goes on where he may land in the future or his situation, just how that'll be. So he's slipping down my board a little bit. When it comes to CJ Mosley in comparison, I mean, realistically, almost the same exact outlook.
Yeah. I mean, they both have very similar ceilings. I mean, you could see a couple interceptions or sacks out of either of them, and it wouldn't surprise you or not. I mean, if you see nothing. So, and that's a tough thing is when you're searching out these types of things, it is kind of cutting hairs at that point. But if you're searching out for some great stuff, here you go.
What's that? Your computer has another virus? Well, my friend, you need help to stop your obsession with the dirty O. All of this searching for air yards and yards after catch and blah, blah, blah. Stop your dirty O obsession by searching for the IDP Pro Players Podcast instead and focus on the other side of the balls. I mean ball. The crew on the IDP Pro Players Podcast care about you and your technology by holding true to their no dirty O mantra. Every week, Gary and John bring you the IDP content you need to save your rosters and dominate your league while avoiding the dirty O. So save your technology by tuning into the IDP Pro Players Podcast with your longtime and totally unoffensive veteran hosts, Johnny the Greek and Gary the IDP Tipster. Follow them on Twitter at I, D, P, RO. One word at the IDP Pro Players Pod.
And who doesn't love talking IDP? It is glorious. What also could be glorious is the potential of this young linebacker that we're about to talk about. So Zaire Collins from the Cardinals had a good season last year. Certainty now. Where are you guys at with him, Kraig? We'll start with you.
So my name's Gary, but I'll go ahead. Go ahead, Kraig, you're back. Go ahead, my bad.
I see you just fine. Everything's cutting out for Brad for me, so I didn't hear the end of Brad stopping. So it must be something between the two of us.
Okay, my bad.
Zaire Collins, for me, it's just how is he going to fit into that new setup that the coaching staff is going to have there? Because I don't think the defense, it sounds like, is going to be the same as it was in prior years. And he was one of those guys that there was a lot of intrigue on how they were going to use him when he came into the league to begin with. There's a lot of talk of, is he going to be an edge player? Is he going to be more of an actual true middle linebacker like he had ended up being used this past year? He showed he could have that potential. He was a guy I really like coming out of college. But how he fits into that, if they're going to use sort of that Eagles type of setup for the defense now there in Arizona, is he going to be that true sort of middle linebacker for him? If he is, I think he could have a really high ceiling, and maybe this time next year, if we see that, we're talking about him closer to the tier 1. But there's just a lot of weird moving parts with that switch and new coaching staff there. And Isaiah Simmons is sort of the wild card, the guy that was a safety in college and then a linebacker for the NFL. He was drafted, and now he's been used at cornerback, like in the slot a lot for the Cardinals last year. How he fits in next to Collins, I think, is going to matter a lot for both of their long-term future.
Gary.
Man, Zaire Collins, it's boiled down to productive by default. I mean, who do you take? Simmons, him. They've got a lot of draft stock into these guys. They're going to slap them out there, at least in this new situation. Who does what? I picked Collins. It's a flip of a coin. I mean, if you look at their production, one had more production than the other last year. One was better graded than the other, but it was like flip-flop. So it's a I don't know, a weird coin to flip. So I'm going with my gut, and I'm going to go with Collins on this one. Pretty simple. All right, fellas. So Brad may be experiencing some heavy downpours and thunderstorms. Are you back with us, Brad? All right. So at the moment, it looks like you're on top, Kraig. Why don't you talk a little Devin Lloyd for us? Now we're towards 23 or 24, if we can include the first part of this tier that we did last week.
Yeah, so we're getting towards the end of here, and if you look at draft capital and sort of what he did last year, a lot of people might have him up higher here. But right now, he's in a situation where a guy we spoke about last week, Foy Alukan, is sort of the main linebacker there. And how Devin Lloyd is going to fit in with him and Chad Muma and this Jaguars team is going to be interesting to see. I think he sort of is the clear second linebacker. Interesting for IDP leagues, depending on your league, you always say, but a lot of places split solo tackles and assists. And his combined tackles were pretty well even split across 59 and 56. Which isn't ideal if you have that split. If you just count a tackle as a tackle, it's a different story. But for a rookie, he showed out well. He had a couple interceptions, 8 pass deflections. Didn't really do a whole lot in the sack tackle for a loss department, but that really wasn't sort of what he was branded coming out of college anyway. But in terms of tackles, I think there's a bright future. I think it just brightens faster if Aluakan moves on, in a year or two. So it'd be interesting to see what happens there. They'll probably go with the younger guys because this is a young Jacksonville team, and they're looking sort of to build to the future to be this juggernaut that they think they can with the offense that they have there. So long term, I really like Lloyd. It's just probably dampened for the next 2 to 3 years, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, Muma hanging, Okaloon, and the big question is that mid-season downslide that he took, that he lost those snaps. I mean, I believe he's going to be the guy just based off of draft stock that they really turned to in the end. And I do believe the talent's there, and I do think Muma is just as talented. And I think you just nailed it. So we're going to move on, and I'm going to mention as I start this that this is a very close to my heart topic. My wife has breast cancer. And if you would allow me to mention that we're raising some money directly, you send your donation to the Breast Cancer National Society for Breast Cancer. We got some tipster leagues coming up. It's like $1 a donation that we'll ask for, and that's on an honor system. But when we get back, we'll go ahead and go on with their rankings right after this.
That a woman is diagnosed with breast cancer every 2 minutes. And we already know finding new innovations in research, surgical options, and clinical trials is essential to finding a cure. And to all those fantasy football ladies that may be listening, we also know with early detection your survival rate goes up. And that's why breast self-exams are very important, and the best way to give your old girls their best fighting chance to win the championship. So, with all that being said, the fellas here at the IDP Pro Players Pod would like to remind everyone, the National Breast Cancer Foundation does take donations, so please, go and give what you can. And let's give our mothers, our wives, our sisters, and every woman, the support, the resources, and maybe even more importantly, the hope, by knowing we all really do care.
Kraig, so we can see after I stammered through that little bit of stuff
great,
for that you can understand why you're the next man up.
Yeah, so looking at here on our list, we got our next 3 guys, our last 3 that we're talking about here in terms of our second tier of linebackers, or consensus of the 3 of us. Next up, Bobby Okereke, formerly of the Colts. He is a free agent. There's a lot of speculation, like you heard from us. He's probably going to go somewhere else. He's going to be commanding some nice money after 2 really productive years that honestly ended up about the same. He played in 17 games for both of them. Some of the stats switched in terms of, whether you got a sack or not, tackles for a loss, pass deflections. But overall, they're pretty consistent the past 2 years, playing at a high level. 132 to 151 combined tackles, 89, 99 in the solos. Like I said, with the mixed big plays in there. He had a decent missed tackle rate. It wasn't anything outrageous, in the 7% range there. So, Gary, do you have any thoughts on where you might see a guy like him fitting as far as teams that are looking for a linebacker?
Well, I think it's possible as long as he is the main run stopper, play caller. I think he could fit in either scheme. I couldn't imagine him having any main problems. I mean, he's not elite, as we could say, but he's definitely another one of those situations. We've got a lot of free agent linebackers that came in this class, and they're well, they were all drafted into this class, so they're all going to get paid somewhere, either by their home teams or somewhere else. Because if we look at this past drafts for the last few years, we've been hit or miss, or we have either good safeties come out or we have good linebackers. So this happened to be one of those good linebacker classes, and I love him and Jermaine Pratt. And I think that personally, I could put this A and B for both of them. I did notice, I don't think you gave Pratt any love in the consensus. Where's your thoughts on him?
Pratt, yeah, I think you were the only one that had him, and I believe you had him down there 24 at the very end of
I just want to get his name in there. I was like, damn.
The thing for me with Pratt is he really is more throughout his career just of a two-down thumper type of guy. I mean, you know what you're going to get out of him. He's going to be fantastic for you in the run game. Coverage, he doesn't really get you much of anything, which to me sort of limits his upside here. You know, I won't say all of these guys because I haven't gone through and memorized all of them and their coverage stats and all that. But most of these guys that you're seeing on here are guys that either are or have that ability to be on the field for 3 downs. So you have that higher ceiling with them. But if you're talking about, you know, having your third linebacker or something, certainly for IDP purposes, Pratt is fantastic because you know what you're getting out of him pretty much game to game with those tackles. So I do like him. I just don't think the ceiling is as high for a lot of these guys.
Yeah, I do like him. I am hoping his veteran presence actually carries him through this. And it really would depend on what kind of scheme. Now, you asked me that question about Okereke. I do think that it would have to be a perfect situation for Pratt. And I think that what you just explained, the organizations are going to be looking at that too. I don't think that they'll misplace him. Hopefully, if somebody signs him and actually gives them a payday that Bengals can't give them, then that ought to indicate something to us. And that's why he's right here teetering. LB2, LB1. We got to remember, as Brad mentioned earlier, before the storm took him out, you know, there's a big pool here, folks. So those hairs, especially getting out of that top 12 or 16 or whatever, those hairs get real fine. And a lot of this is going to play out in scenario.
He's actually really similar, I think. I don't know if he necessarily has the same upside because I do think this next guy we're talking about is better overall. But I think he is similar to Rashaan Evans in that, you know, Evans throughout his time in the NFL has been very similar to that, where he's going to be the guy that's going to be able to stop the run, just amass that huge number of tackles for you when he was in Tennessee. And then he had this past year in Atlanta. He doesn't miss a whole lot of tackles. You know, past 3 years, 6.6, 1.9% for missed tackle rate. I mean, that's fantastic. But you flip it over to coverage, and, you know, the completion percentages are all in the 70s. You know, the rating is like an 80, and 112 for, you know, QB rating passing against him. He was on the field all the time for Atlanta, who was great for IDP, but it wasn't great in terms of what he was giving them in terms of coverage on those plays. If you put Pratt in another situation like that, I think you'd probably get something similar. Evans was a first-round talent. He's still relatively young here. You know, he's 27 this whole year pretty much. He'll probably get another shot somewhere else, but, you know, it does say something a little bit about the fact that he got a 1-year deal with Atlanta, sort of prove it after the Titans essentially weren't willing to pay him after drafting the first round. And I think it's going to matter for Evans, too, where he's going to go and what that role he's going to play.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And almost a productive by default situation, just like you mentioned. I actually, what I was doing, I was looking up Jermaine Pratt, telling Jermaine Pratt that apparently Kraig thinks he's as bad as Rashaan Evans is in coverage. And I am solo. How scary is this? We're going to sit here and put Kraig right back in.
All right.
Oh no, we're primed and ready, man. It was it was kind of like flowed. Don't ask me. I'm glad you're back, and we're ready to roll on.
All right, so last guy that made our list here. Before we get into that, I'm just going to throw out some of these other names because these are names that are like honorable mentions that probably show up for most of us sort of in this next tier here. Patrick Queen, Jack Sanborn, the aforementioned Matt Milano, Drew Tranquil, Malcolm Rodriguez, Troy Anderson, Christian Harris, and Jermaine Pratt. So a nice mix of veterans and sort of second-year guys thrown in there, where guys that have shown stuff in the past or guys that had a really promising first year and we're hoping to build off of. A lot of those names you probably hear us talking about. And, there wasn't that much of a difference really in probably this next guy too, just how we calculated this out ended up being the next guy. It was Cody Barton. What's that?
Justin Mark, why we brought up his name, Jack Sanborn. Justin Mark, buddy of ours, left us a little question. Do you think Jack Sanborn is relevant or gets replaced by free agent or rookie play? I'm just going to throw that one at you.
I think he's going to get a shot this year. He's on a super cheap contract. The Bears are still building up from that rebuild that they had sort of started. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things that they have to get figured out on offense and defense, quite frankly. Their defensive line didn't do a whole lot last year. One of the guys like Al-Qadim Muhammad, I think, is already gone that they had brought in. So they're still figuring out those pieces of it. Replacing Roquan Smith is going to be another big one. And Sanborn, although it was a small sample size, like 5 or 6 games really, he showed he could be productive, and he rated out well when he was on the field for him. So I think he is going to get that chance. I do think it is dangerous to just project him, for the next 3 to 5 years or something to be an IDP force. We're going to have to see it over the course of a long season here, not just like that, third of a season-ish that we did last year. It gave us a lot of hope, a lot of promise, and it was awesome when you picked him up off of waivers. Right. You got to plug him into your lineup and just see him light it up. We love seeing that. But if you're hoping for that to just continue onward because you saw it for a bit, a lot of times you're going to hit fool's gold.
Yeah, you got to be clear about that, because if you got this guy in a dynasty league last year or keeper league or something, and you can keep him, that's a great value. Get him off the waiver wire, just like you mentioned. But then Kraig mentioned, but then you turn around and look at it this year. If I'm in a redraft or a dynasty startup, I'm not going to be jumping overboard no matter how much I love this Wisconsin product, and I think he'll stick. I think he's going to be part of this defensive rebuild that they've got. I think at least give him another redraft shot. So I do like Sanborn a lot, dynasty, but it's a prove-it year for us as IDP owners, as IDP managers, or as NFL fans. He's got to come in and solidify what he showed us last year, period.
And if he does, he shows out and has another great season, IDP production-wise and also rating-wise overall, where the team's going to want to keep him. They'll probably get him a little bit of a contract extension, because I think he has 2 years this next year and then one after super cheap, and they'd want to lock him up before he, has a couple huge seasons in a row and would get a lot more money out there on the open market. So, check back in a year and we'll see how it lands, but he certainly could be much higher up if he does pan out.
Yep.
Last guy on our list here, and I'm pretty sure he was not on Gary's list, which means he was on Brad and I's at some point, I think. Yep. Brad
and I both had to be here. He wouldn't be on here, right? Right.
But Cody Barton of the Seattle Seahawks, he is a 5th-year player, and he is an unrestricted free agent. So where he goes will really matter too. But he played well next to Jordan Brooks this past year, although scheme does matter. We've seen a lot of productive 2 linebackers out of that Seattle team for as long as Pete Carroll's been there anyway, and they've had guys. So could it be a matter of that? It could be, but when Barton got his chance this year, he started 11 out of 17 games. He played in all 17, 84 solos, 136 combined, with some big plays. He got like 6 combined sacks, tackles for a loss, got some pass deflections. But Gary, he wasn't on your list. Could be any number of reasons why. Do you kind of think it's just a product of where he was?
Oh, well, no. I think Patrick Queen, Matt Milano, Drew Tranquil. I just think there's other deserving guys, not necessarily even if I didn't list them. Just splitting those hairs in my mind. I think age-wise, I wasn't impressed in watching his games. He faltered here and there. Not saying he didn't stand up, Kraig. Not counteracting that, because he did have his best season on film and in production for us. What Pete Carroll does, what Seattle does, I think 100% hinges on him going forward. I'm just not sure that he's got that talent or ability or had enough time to even develop it in playing time. I mean, we're looking at Bobby Wagner all these years, even when what was it? What was it? Right? KJ Wright.
KJ Wright was there for a
long
time.
When all this. So he's been there a long time, journeyman's depth guy, and they kept drafting over him to find other starters. Jordan Brooks, So yeah. I'm just pumping my brakes. I'm not going to put him in that standard top tier. I don't believe the portion or the what we've seen this year. I think it might be fake. Just a gut call. There's so many others out there to go after if I'm wrong. Hopefully I am wrong for consensus sake here, but I'm just rolling with that.
I am interested to see if he returns to Seattle because of that injury to Jordan Brooks, and they sort of know what they have in Barton, and they need, like we've seen those two linebackers. They didn't really have a whole lot in depth behind those two guys this past year, so whether they move somewhere else in free agency or the draft, sometimes having a guy that's been in the system, for 4 years and knows it, sometimes that'll matter to teams when they know that their top guy has a good chance of not being ready for the start of the season. So it'll be interesting to see where he ends up.
All right. Hey, is that it, Kraig? We done?
That is our top 24. And like I said, those were sort of our honorable mentions and other 5 or 6 guys that we covered.
All right. Well, as I try to get myself over here so I don't embarrass myself as we exit.
But we can bring up one of those guys, Gary, because we do have we're a few minutes under an hour. The highest up guy on your list, you did mention him in passing, Drew Tranquill. So you sort of have him in that middle of your second tier. What are you hoping for him going forward here? Because he's another guy that's sort of flown under the radar on the team that he was on for several seasons, and then sort of had a breakout there. Do you think that's enough? As opposed to someone like a Cody Barton here.
Yeah. Let me think for a second. I feel that Drew Tranquill will probably remain a Charger. I think he's a homegrown product that they've really invested and did this for a reason to get him to the point. I mean, he went through a lot of health issues there, or actually was getting ready to break out just a couple of years ago and had health issues with a foot injury. 4th play of the game, I about shit myself. I remember I was watching the game. He was my breakout call that year. It went nuts. It went left, but he's online now. I think that he'll re-sign with the Chargers. But I also think that he finally got to display that okay coverage, good tackling, and he's got a high IQ out of Notre Dame. And I really like this guy in any scheme out there as long as he's, again, the main Mike guy, run guy. I don't think that if he went to, say, anywhere where he played the weak side linebacker, say Seattle, I'm not too interested in that for him in that position, and he would probably drop down out of this board a little bit. But as it is, when I put him in my consensus, that's assuming that he'll be a Charger.
Fair enough, and they've been looking for a good middle linebacker for a while there. They've had a whole bunch of mess just thrown around back and forth, whether it's because of injuries or people not living up to their expectations. So I would have to think they would like some consistency from that spot.
Yep. Well, I'll tell you what.
That's our list.
Yep. Sweet. I just want to make sure because Brad's not here, and Brad and Kraig and I will be back next week, but I'm going to let Kraig take us out of here after I say this. And I ask you, hey, I forgot to add an outro, so check out this ad at the end when Kraig is done. And thanks for watching live on YouTube. Make sure to smash the subscribe button and like this video on YouTube.
Yeah, so this is our second show of the IDP Pro Manager Pod. Thanks for tuning in live for those of you that did and catching us on your favorite podcatcher. Brad is still with us in spirit and in heart, but he'll be back next week with us live when the weather is more cooperative. I'm Kraig Reith, and for Gary, all of us here at the SGP Network, thank you for tuning in, and we really appreciate it. Have a great day, everybody.
Ever notice these days how things have changed with sports entertainment? Suddenly everyone is edgy and they don't mind offending people with offensive words. It's everywhere. Podcasts, to radio, to primetime TV. All I want are NFL defensive player reports, maybe a quick update on the best streaming corners, and yet I have to hear about the dirty O. That's right, offensive player discussions and hot takes blocking my path to the sweet defensive information I need.
Bullshit.
That was until I found the IDP Pro Players podcast. And now, unless the IDP pros John or Gary mess up, I know I'm not going to be offended by their no dirty O approach.
Damn.
So take my word for it. Catch the Sports Gambling IDP Pro Player podcast every week and leave the dirty O behind. So if you or someone you know has an IDP degenerate problem, that's terrific. And the fantasy move to make is to go follow a couple of the best veterans in the fantasy football industry. That was on Twitter at I, D, P, RO. One word at the IDP Pro Players Pod.
Oh, yeah.